Meanwhile, internationally, the bizarre targeting of Israel continues on a wide variety of fronts. Pope Francis has now called for a genocide investigation in Gaza, which is just an absurdity on every possible level. Francis reportedly privately used the term genocide last year to describe Israeli military actions while speaking to a group of Palestinians, according to the Washington Post. And apparently, he has a new book called Hope Never Disappoints, Pilgrims Toward a Better World, that was based on interviews with him. And Francis is quoted in the book as saying, according to some experts, what is happening in Gaza has the characteristics of a genocide. Okay, that is idiocy on the highest possible level. But then again, Pope Francis has expressed a wide variety of views that can only be declared idiocy throughout his tenure as Pope. That does not mean everything that he says is stupid, obviously. Many of the things he says, I think, are quite wise. International relations do not fall into that category. He has said a wide variety of foolish and counterproductive things. But that, again, is because Pope Francis has strong tendencies, shall we say, toward liberation theology, which is essentially Marxist-inflected Catholicism, which is a real problem inside the Catholic Church. Yeah, it is just another indicator of the moral foolishness of people on the left to suggest this sort of thing. Speaking of which, the United States is now hitting, under Joe Biden, an Israeli settler group with sanctions over supposed West Bank violence. Okay, that's not really what's happening here. They're proclaiming it's about West Bank violence in Judea and Samaria. That's really not what this is about. They're now sanctioning a group called Amana. Amana is basically an aid group for people who are building homes in Judea and Samaria who are Jewish. That's what Amana is. And so they're attempting to now label this a, quote, key part of the Israeli extremist settler movement. Now, meanwhile, the Biden administration is flowing something like $230 million into Palestinian coffers in the middle of a war in which the Palestinian Authority has been supportive of Hamas. It's absolutely unbelievable, but it's just too predictable, obviously. According to the Washington Free Beacon, the new sanctions are the broadest to date, imposing unprecedented punitive measures on 3 Israeli organizations the administration accuses of fomenting violence against Palestinians in the West Bank. They were leveled just days after a coalition of nearly 90 congressional Democrats petitioned the Biden administration to ramp up sanctions on Israel before leaving the White House. And this has become sort of de rigueur on the part of Democrats leaving the White House. Remember that Barack Obama, as he was leaving the White House, essentially abstained from an absurd UN Security Council resolution that declared the Temple Mount was actually sovereign Islamic territory. So this is nothing new. As Joe Biden is on his way out, he's going to grant some sort of sop to the wildly anti-Israel progressives. The sanctions were announced just 3 days after the Biden-Harris administration awarded another $230 million in funding for humanitarian projects in the West Bank and the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip. That is more than $2 billion in taxpayer funds to the Palestinians since Hamas's October 7th terror spree on Israel, which, by the way, is unbelievable considering that everyone distributing that aid is, again, on the side of Hamas or supports terror in other ways, because the Palestinian Authority still has on its books pay-to-slay laws that actually pay people in jail for killing Jews. It's insane. The radical left can't deal with a lot of things, like, for example, the profound and unshakable bond between the Christian and Jewish communities in America. While the secular left pushes their anti-religious agenda, Christians and Jews have stood together, defending our shared values and religious liberties. That's why I'm proud to partner with the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. For over 40 years, they've been doing something remarkable, building bridges between our communities through faith, shared values, and mutual respect. And the fellowship doesn't just talk, they act. Right now, they're on the ground providing real help to vulnerable Jewish families and elderly around the globe. We're talking about food, medical care, emergency assistance, and security to people who need it most. Look, as somebody who spent years talking about Judeo-Christian values, I can tell you, this organization represents exactly what makes our line so powerful. It's all about Christians and Jews coming together to do what our faiths command, helping those in need. If you want to be part of this incredible mission, visit benforthefellowship.org. That's benforthefellowship.org. Your support makes a real difference in people's lives. God bless and thank you. Honestly, there are a lot of people suffering in Israel right now, particularly up north and also in the Gaza envelope. They're being helped out by the fellowship. You can help them. benforthefellowship.org. That's benforthefellowship.org. Again, the latest sanctions are targeting this group Amana, which is designed, as we say, to help people actually move into homes in the West Bank. But according to the State Department, they say that Amana, quote, has established dozens of illegal settler outposts and directly engaged in dispossession of private land owned by Palestinians in its support of settlers. What do they mean by dispossession? They mean people like illegally grabbing like a home that's already legally owned, or do they mean that these are disputed territories and both sides claim sovereignty over them, which is actually what's happening in Judea and Samaria? Okay, the reality is that Palestinians have been illegally building in the West Bank for a very long time. All you have to do is take a drive through the West Bank. You can see entire villages that have been illegally built there by Palestinians. They're completely empty, but they've been put there without the windows there so they don't have to pay tax in order to occupy that particular land for supposed future negotiations or simply to change the facts on the ground. This is an ongoing legal dispute, but the Biden administration has taken the position that illegal building by Palestinians in the West Bank is legal and Israeli building in the West Bank is somehow illegal, which is ridiculous on its face, legally speaking. And of course, the idea of leveraging sanctions or levying sanctions against a group like Amana is specifically designed to misuse U.S. sanctions to oppose Jews who tend toward the right. The Foundation for Defensive Democracies wrote in an analysis, quote, usually sanctions target those responsible for severe wrongdoing like terrorist financing, nuclear proliferation, and large-scale human rights abuses. The new sanctions break this mold by targeting Israeli Jews in the West Bank accused of property crimes and vandalism or of simply associating with the wrong people. Of course, the Biden-Harris administration sanctions list, according to the Washington Free Beacon, was built with the support of anti-Israel non-governmental organizations, including the Muslim Brotherhood-tied Dawn Mina, a radical anti-Israel organization, according to Eugene Kontorovich and other analysts from FDD. Not a shock at all. This is what they do. And of course, they're doing this to please their progressive base. Bernie Sanders has an entire piece in the Washington Post today calling for no more arms sales to quote-unquote Netanyahu. Okay, the United States does not make arms sales to Netanyahu. They don't make arms sales to any specific Israeli politician. That's not how arms sales work. Arms sales go to the ally. They go to the state. If we make an arms sale to Ukraine, it's not going to Zelensky personally. That's not how any of this works. But Bernie Sanders is a moral moron, as always he has been. Meanwhile, they're doing this in the middle, by the way, of Hamas legitimately just stealing aid en masse. According to the New York Times, over 100 aid trucks were stolen in Gaza by Hamas, according to the UNRWA, which is basically a Hamas front group. Somehow, of course, the New York Times finds a way to blame this on Israel because that's the way all of this always works. What a pathetic infrastructure the Biden administration and their allies have built in the anti-Israel front. Well, meanwhile, in Pennsylvania, we have some updates. So as you'll recall, Pennsylvania Democrats were attempting to illegally count votes in Pennsylvania to overturn the election of Dave McCormick, the senator-elect from Pennsylvania, Republican. Now, apparently, the Pennsylvania Supreme Court has decided that they are going to order the boards of elections throughout the state to follow their previous rulings and not count mail-in and absentee ballots that failed to comply with the state election code. This is according to Breitbart. The Pennsylvania Supreme Court issued that ruling on Monday as election board officials in Bucks County in particular have defied Pennsylvania Supreme Court precedent and moved to count ballots that the court has determined cannot be counted. So that at least is a piece of good news. It is insane that the people who were illegally counting ballots were not arrested for the crime of having done so. Governor Josh Shapiro of Pennsylvania put out a statement saying, quote, as I've made clear for years, every eligible Pennsylvanian's vote should be counted in every race. And thanks to the hard work of Republican and Democratic election officials all across the Commonwealth, Pennsylvania has held another free, fair, safe, and secure election. As counties continued counting ballots from the 2024 general election and a mandatory statewide recount begins in the U.S. Senate race, they were confronted with the lack of legal clarity surrounding undated mail-in ballots that caused significant confusion and put counties in a challenging legal position. Given this lack of clarity, county officials in each of our 67 counties were damned if they did and damned if they didn't. That, of course, is a lie. It is not even remotely true. Democrats were just illegally counting ballots, and Josh Shapiro should not lie about that, especially if he considers himself a sort of pragmatic Democratic moderate with hopes for a political future. Don't lie about illegally counting votes if that is your thought. Are you tired of the lies and the twists of the mainstream media talking points? Yeah, me too. Join me in my newest series, Fact, where I dismantle and bring truth to this tiring mainstream agenda.